I am unraveling. It's a funny word, unraveling. Don't let the un fool you. I know a lot of people think, ooh, that must mean something negative or bad. No, no, no. It's actually just the opposite. Unraveling is an act of creation, which can only come out of destruction. To unravel is to loosen, to free up, to unknot, to become anything, to become what's true. Do you want to know my truth? I got fired from my dream job. The last time you probably saw me was the day I was signing off of my show. It was April of 2021. I was a CNN news anchor for over a decade. I was in millions of your living rooms, and it was an absolute privilege. Over the course of my career, I met or interviewed presidents, politicians, astronauts, scientists, rock stars. I got to go on Willie Nelson's bus a couple of times. Let me tell you, that experience is everything you hope it is. You and I lived through some of the best and also most devastating times together. Terror attacks, school shootings, presidential politics, and that pandemic. I wept with you because I cared. But that day, I was signing off of my show. There was something I couldn't tell you that had everything to do with why I was actually leaving. CNN has been my dream job ever since I was a little girl. I'm from Atlanta, y'all, literally down the road from the birthplace of CNN. In fact, I don't know if we have any baseball fans in here, but we were a big Braves family growing up. And I remember my family and I would go to these baseball games. And we would bring binoculars, not just to check out like John Smoltz or David Justice, by the way, hubba hubba, but I wanted to see if I could spot Jane Fonda or Ted Turner somewhere down on the field. I mean, Ted Turner, the cable news pioneer, founder of CNN. What I'm trying to tell you is that CNN was in my bones since I was a little girl. And after many years in my 20s in local news, working the graveyard shift, rolling the teleprompter under the news desk with my foot often the wrong way, covering all the water skiing squirrels, I finally made it. I made it to CNN. Not only was I a correspondent, I eventually landed my own show, and for the entire time I was there, I was the only woman with 2 hours to myself. And you know what? I was really good at my job. And I loved it until I didn't. I'll never forget the moment. It was 2015. I bet you all do too. It was the day that Donald Trump rode that escalator down in Trump Tower. And I believe, at least from a cable news perspective, that that was the day that the way we covered news completely changed. My boss, who was the president of CNN at the time, Jeff Zucker, he was, and I'm sure still is, like an absolute genius at taking a news story and making it so totally compelling. So he would come to us and he would say, okay, today we're gonna blow it out. We're gonna go wall-to-wall coverage on anything from a stranded cruise ship to a missing plane. Do y'all remember MH370? To suddenly, this reality TV star running for president of the United States. And that last story, that kept us busy. Now, we were journalists, we reported on the facts, we called out the BS, but you know how now, like, we binge watch TV shows? You all at that time were binging the news. I've talked to so many of you about this, you've come up to me, it was like an addiction, like to candy. Or worse, cocaine. We had the numbers to prove it. Our ratings were insane. Thank you very much, by the way. But between the endless panels and the talking heads, it felt like a high school food fight, and I was the referee. It felt less like capital J journalism and more like entertainment. And I want to stand before you and say something I have never done before. I'm going to admit that I hated it. And I want to own something else. I was part of the problem, of the polarization in America. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, well, Brooke, if it was so bad, why didn't you just leave? I thought about it. I couldn't because of that little girl who brought binoculars to Braves games, who in her 20s lived in rural West Virginia, who woke up at 2 a.m, was dodging deer on Interstate 64 to go anchor the news at 5 a.m. with a man 3 times my age. We dated the wrong guys. We put off having kids. We can't quit now. This is our dream. Well, some years later, CNN beat me to it. I was a top-rated anchor in my time slot. I was beloved by my colleagues and you, the viewer. But one morning in the middle of the pandemic, over breakfast, I got this phone call from my agent, and that was it. I was out. No real explanation, out. And as I stand before you 4 years later, I still have no idea why. All I can do is guess. Maybe it's because at that same time, in my free time on the weekends, I was researching and writing my book. It's called Huddle, about the collective power of women. And so suddenly I found myself in rooms with Black women judges in Houston, Texas, or I was in Washington with military veterans turned congresswomen, and I was interviewing professional athletes and activists and teachers and mothers. And I learned something almost just through sharing oxygen or osmosis. I learned something that changed my life. I learned how to speak up. And I realized that may sound bananas because you would turn on the TV to see me speaking for a living, giving voice to the voiceless, right? But the person I was so rarely speaking up for was me. I want to own that too. And I thought at the time my story didn't matter very much. Maybe you know what I mean. But I was out. And what I have realized is that in getting drop-kicked out of my dream job, that was the beginning of my unraveling. And it has been painful and messy and a freaking gift. Welcome to the human experience, right? And this is where you come in. Because in my unraveling, it's gotten me thinking about you and us and our collective unraveling. All those years in the cockpit of TV news with a front row seat to history and humanity, I learned a few things. We all see it, we feel it, how so totally divided this nation is politically, right? But this is something else. We can't seem to agree on what's real anymore. And when we can't agree on what's real, and we see our neighbor, and our neighbor's like, hey, the sky is blue, but we don't like how they're walking, or how they're acting, or how they're speaking, or the color of their skin, and suddenly we're like, whoa, you're no longer my neighbor. I don't even see you as human, you're my enemy. You're my enemy. And that then is reflected in the news, in the othering, in the murdering, in the caging. For what? What really? America is at an inflection point. Reality, the truth, is at an inflection point. And I believe this is our chrysalis moment in America. Y'all know the story of how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly? Or you think you do? I'm gonna rock your world right now. I have read so much research and studies. It's not like a caterpillar is like, okay, cool, time to be a butterfly. No. Caterpillar's like, hey, I'm a caterpillar, and all of a sudden it starts turning into goo, all right? And the caterpillar cells are like, whoa, I just want to be a caterpillar. I want to stay with what I know and who I am and what's familiar and what's comfortable. Why is this happening to me? I want to fight for survival. I want to fight for who I've always been. What is the caterpillar? What are these caterpillar cells fighting? They're fighting what's called imaginal cells. What are imaginal cells? They're these teeny tiny seeds of the butterfly that, guess what, have existed in the caterpillar all along. They've just been quiet. They've laid dormant until the caterpillar starts turning into goo. And we know how the movie ends, right? Like these caterpillar cells, they're programmed to fight, but they're programmed to lose because these imaginal cells, they start growing and they start multiplying and they start fighting. And by the way, sorry, nerd alert, imaginal, the Latin root, imago, imago. What other words share the root? Imagination. Imagine. Image. So it's this brutal fight to this near death. And it's the imaginal cells that are the only cells that survive this metamorphosis meltdown. And the imaginal cells, they use the goo to reconstruct an entirely new organism. So the caterpillar cells dissolve entirely into itself. And what comes from this process is an entirely new being. I believe this biological metaphor is the most profound of any example of transformation that exists. So to bring it full circle to us, we are the caterpillar. We're fighting the goo. We're fighting the fight. In our nation's 250 years of existence, I believe we are finally at our chrysalis moment. And this may be controversial to say because I know what it feels like for all of us right now. But this has to happen in order for us to emerge on the other side in full truth and in shared humanity. This is the darkness before the dawn. How do we get there? Great question. We have to do something that, I don't know about you, I am terrible at. We have to get uncomfortable and we have to embrace the mess. In other words, we have to embrace the goo. Take it from me, in my own personal unraveling these last few years, I am an East Coast girl, lived there my entire life, 4 decades plus. I moved everything I knew to Los Angeles within this last year. That was messy. I moved right in with a teenage girl. We're at least on the other side, but ask her, that was messy. And I still don't totally know what I'm doing on the other side of CNN. I'm open, I'm curious, but that still feels messy. Embrace the mess, embrace the goo. Get curious, ask questions of it. What's the lesson that we're supposed to learn here, right? And also, we have to face our fear. What's the opposite of fear? It isn't courage. It's compassion and empathy. Remember those? We have to embrace them. I don't care what your politics are, we have to lead ourselves. We have to save ourselves. Change begins at home. So what if I were to tell you that on the other side of our collective unraveling, that we really have this potential for flight? That if we could possibly embrace this moment, which I know feels like death, we're angry, but the truth is, it's grief also. We have to grieve what has been and what can no longer be in order for us to fly. We have to accept what feels like self-destruction in order to step into full transformation. So that when we then see our neighbor and our neighbor says, the sky is blue, we say, hello. I don't agree with you. In fact, I may not ever agree with you, but I see you. I see you. As for me and my unraveling, I wish I'd embraced the goo earlier, y'all, but it's never too late. I realize I've been asking the wrong question, which was, why me? And now I know. In fact, it's this. Who am I? And where did I go? Thanks to those imaginal cells, those teeny tiny cells of the butterfly, I realized I was here all along. In truth, right here. In spite of, or dare I say, thanks to being fired. And, by the way, after that, divorced. And then, after that, starting entirely over and moving across the country and falling in love with my truest, best self. And with my new man. And we have a saying around our house. Do you want to hear it? Burn the boats. There is no going back. So, I am no longer CNN's Brooke Baldwin. I am just Brooke.